The Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations present Orson Welles and the Mercury Theater on the air in The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Ladies and gentlemen, the director of the Mercury Theater and the star of these broadcasts, Orson Welles.
We know now that in the early years of the 20th century, this world was being watched closely by intelligences greater than man's, and yet as mortal as its own. We know now that as human beings busied themselves about their various concerns, they were scrutinized and studied, perhaps almost as narrowly as a man with a microscope might scrutinize the transient creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over the small spinning fragment of solar driftwood which by chance or design man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space. Yet across an immense ethereal gulf, minds that to our minds as ours are to the beasts in the jungle, intellect vast, cool and unsympathetic, regarded this earth with envious eyes and slowly and surely drew their plans against us. In the 39th year of the 20th century came the great disillusionment. It was near the end of October. Business was better. The war scare was over. More men were back at work. Sales were picking up. On this particular evening, October 30th, the Crossroads service estimated that 32 million people were listening in on radios.
For the next 24 hours, not much change in temperature, a slight atmospheric disturbance of undetermined origin is reported over Nova Scotia, causing a low-pressure area to move down rather rapidly over the northeastern states, bringing a forecast of rain, accompanied by winds of light gale force. Maximum temperature 66, minimum 48. This weather report comes to you from the Government Weather Bureau. We now take you to the Meridian Room in the Hotel Park Plaza in downtown New York, where you will be entertained by the music of Ramon Recao and his orchestra. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. From the Meridian Room in the Park Plaza in New York City, we bring you the music of Ramon Recao and his orchestra. With a touch of Spanish, Ramon Recao leads off with La Comparsita. Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News at 20 minutes before 8 Central Time. Professor Farrell of Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving towards the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Pearson of the observatory at Princeton confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of Ramon Recao playing for you in the Meridian Room of the Park Plaza Hotel, situated in downtown New York. Now a tune that never loses favor, the ever-popular Stardust, Ramon Recao and his orchestra. Ladies and gentlemen, following on the news given in our bulletin a moment ago, the Government Meteorological Bureau has requested the large observatories of the country to keep an astronomical watch on any further disturbances occurring on the planet Mars. Due to the unusual nature of this occurrence, we have arranged an interview with noted astronomer Professor Pearson. He will give us his views on the event. In a few moments, we will take you to the Princeton Observatory at Princeton, New Jersey. We take you until then to the music of Ramon Recao and his orchestra. We are now ready to take you to the Princeton Observatory at Princeton, where Carl Phillips, our commentator, will interview Professor Richard Pearson, famous astronomer. We take you now to Princeton, New Jersey.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Carl Phillips speaking to you from the observatory at Princeton. I am standing in a large semicircular room, pitch black except for an oblong split in the ceiling. Through this opening, I can see a sprinkling of stars that cast a kind of frosty glow over an intricate mechanism of the huge telescope. The ticking sound you hear is the vibration of the clockwork. Professor Pearson stands directly above me on a small platform, peering through a giant lens. I ask you to be patient, ladies and gentlemen, during any delay that may arise during our interview. Besides his ceaseless watch of the heavens, Professor Pearson may be interrupted by telephone or other communications. During this period, he is in constant touch with the astronomical centers of the world. Professor, may I begin our questions?
Anytime, Mr. Phillips.
Professor, would you please tell our radio audience exactly what you see as you observe the planet Mars through your telescope?
Nothing unusual at the moment, Mr. Phillips. A red disk swimming in a blue sea. Transverse stripes across the disk. Quite distinct now because Mars happens to be a point nearest to Earth, in opposition, as we call it.
In your opinion, what do these transverse stripes signify, Professor Pearson?
Not canals, I can assure you, Mr. Phillips, although that's the popular conjecture for those who imagine Mars to be inhabited. From a scientific viewpoint, the stripes are merely a result of atmospheric conditions peculiar to the planet.
Then you're quite convinced as a scientist that living intelligence, as we know it, does not exist on Mars?
I'd say the chances are against it, 1,000 to 1.
And yet, how do you account for those gas eruptions occurring on the surface of the planet at regular intervals?
Mr. Phillips, I cannot account for it.
For the benefit of our listeners, how far is Mars from the Earth?
Approximately 40 million miles.
Well, that seems a safe enough distance.
Thank you.
Just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Someone has handed Professor Pearson a message. While he reads it, let me remind you that we are speaking to you from the observatory in Princeton, New Jersey, where we are interviewing the world's famous astronomer, Professor Pearson. One moment, please. Professor Pearson has passed me a message which he has just received. Professor, may I read the message to the listening audience?
Certainly, Mr. Phillips.
Ladies and gentlemen, I shall read you a wire addressed to Professor Pearson from Dr. Gray of the National History Museum, New York, 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Seismic registered shock of almost earthquake intensity occurring within a radius of 20 miles of Princeton. Please investigate. Signed, Lloyd Gray, Chief of Astronomical Division. Professor Pearson, could this occurrence possibly have something to do with the disturbances observed on the planet Mars?
Hardly, Mr. Phillips. This is probably a meteorite of unusual size, and its arrival at this particular time is merely a coincidence. However, we shall conduct a search as soon as daylight permits.
Thank you, Professor. Ladies and gentlemen, for the past 10 minutes, we've been speaking to you from the observatory at Princeton, bringing you a special interview with Professor Pearson, noted astronomer. This is Carl Phillips speaking. We are returning you now to our New York studio.
Ladies and gentlemen, here's the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News, Toronto, Canada. Professor Morse of McGill University reports observing a total of 3 explosions on the planet Mars between the hours of 7:45 p.m. and 9:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This confirms earlier reports received from American observatories. Now, nearer to home comes a special announcement from Trenton, New Jersey. It is reported that at 8:50 p.m., a huge flaming object, believed to be a meteorite, fell on the farm in the neighborhood of Grover's Mill, New Jersey, 22 miles from Trenton. The flash in the sky was visible within a radius of several hundred miles, and the noise of the impact was heard as far as north as Elizabeth. We have dispatched a special mobile unit to the scene, and we will have our commentator, Carl Phillips, give you a word description as soon as he can reach there from Princeton. In the meantime, we take you now to the Hotel Martinet in Brooklyn, where Bobby Millett and his orchestra are offering a program of dance music.
Gentlemen, this is Phillips again at the Wellness Farm, Crossroads Middle, New Jersey. Professor Pearson and myself made the 11 miles from Princeton in 10 minutes. Well, I hardly know where to begin to paint for you a word picture of the strange scene before my eyes, like something out of a modern Arabian Nights. Well, I just got here. I haven't had a chance to look around yet. I guess that's it. I guess that's the thing directly in front of me, half buried in a vast pit. Must have struck with terrific force. The ground is covered with splinters of a tree and must have struck on its way down. What I can see of the object itself doesn't look very much like a meteor. At least, not the videos that I've seen. It looks more like a huge cylinder. It has a diameter of, what would you say, Professor Pearson? What would you say? What is the diameter? About 30 yards. The metal on the sheath is, well, I've never seen anything like it. The color is sort of yellowish-white. Curious spectators are now pressing close to the object in spite of the efforts of the police to keep them back. They're getting in front of my line of vision. Would you mind standing to one side, please?
You there? One side.
While the policemen are pushing the crowd back, here's Mr. Wilmot, owner of the farm here. He may have some interesting facts to add.
Mr. Wilmot, would you please tell the radio audience as much as you remember about this rather unusual visitor that dropped into your backyard?
Step closer, please. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mr. Wilmot.
Well, I was listening to the radio.
Closer and louder, please.
Pardon me.
Louder, please. And closer.
Yes, sir. Well, I was listening to the radio and I was kind of drowsing. That professor fellow was talking about Mars, so I was kind of half dozing and half...
Yes, Mr. Wilmot. Then what happened?
As I was saying, well, I was listening to the radio kind of halfway.
Yes, Mr. Wilmot. And then you saw something?
Not first off, I heard something.
And what did you hear?
A hissing sound, kind of like this. Kind of like a 4th of July rocket.
Then what?
I turned my head out the window and I would have swore I was to sleep and dreaming.
Yes?
I kind of seen a greenish streak and then zingo! Something smacked me straight clear out of my chair.
Well, were you frightened, Mr. Wilmot?
Well, I ain't quite sure. I reckon I was kind of riled.
Thank you, Mr. Wilmot. Thank you.
Want me to tell you some more?
No, that's quite all right. That's plenty. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard Mr. Wilmot, owner of the farm where the sting has fallen. I wish I could convey the atmosphere, the background of this fantastic scene. Hundreds of cars are parked in the field in back of us. Police are trying to rope off the railway leading to the farm, but it's no use. They're breaking right through. Cars' headlights throw an enormous spot on the pit where the object's half buried. Some of the more daring souls are now venturing near the edge. Their silhouettes stand out against the metal sheen. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. Wait a minute. Something's crawling out of the hollow top. Someone or something. I can see peering out of that black hole 2 luminous discs. Are they eyes? It might be a face. It might be... Good heavens, something's wriggling out. A shadow like a gray snake. Now it's another one. and another. They look like tentacles to me. There I can see the thing's body. It's large as a bear, and it glistens like wet leather. But that face, ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable. I can hardly force myself to keep looking at it. The eyes are black and gleam like a serpent. Its mouth is V-shaped, with saliva dropping from its rimless lips that seem to quiver and pulsate. The monster, or whatever it is, can hardly move. It seems to be weighed down by possibly gravity or something. The thing's rising up. The crowd falls back now. They've seen plenty. This is the most extraordinary experience. I can't find words. I'll pull this microphone with me as I talk. I have to stop the description until I can take a new position. Hold on, will you please? I'll be right back in a minute.
We are now bringing you to an eyewitness account of what's happening on the Wilmoth Farm, Grover's Mill, New Jersey. We now return you to Carl Phillips at Grover's Mill.
Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, here I am, back of a stone wall that adjoins Mr. Wilmoth's garden. From here, I can get a sweep of the whole scene. I'll give you every detail as long as I can talk. As long as I can see. More state police have arrived. They're drawing up a cordon in front of the pit, about 30 of them. No need to push the crowd back now. They're willing to keep their distance. The captain is conferring with someone. I can't quite see who. Oh, yes, I believe it's Professor Pearson. Yes, it is. Now they parted. The professor moves around one side, studying the object, while the captain and two policemen advance with something in their hands. I can see it now. It's white handkerchief tied to a pole. A flag of truce. If those creatures know what that means, what anything means. Wait, something's happening. A humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror. It was right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Good Lord, damn flame! Now the whole field caught on fire. The woods, the barn, gas tanks of automobiles. It's spreading everywhere. Coming this way. About 20 yards to my right.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to circumstances beyond our control, we are unable to continue the broadcast from Grover's Mill. Evidently, there's some difficulty with our field transmission. However, we will return to that point at the earliest opportunity. In the meantime, we have a late bulletin from San Diego, California. Professor Indolkoffer, speaking at a dinner of the California Astronomical Society, expressed the opinion that explosions on Mars are undoubtedly nothing more than severe volcanic disturbances on the surface of the planet. We now continue with our piano interlude. Ladies and gentlemen, I've just been handed a message that came in from Groversville by telephone. Just a moment. At least 40 people, including 6 state troopers, lie dead in a field east of village of Grover's Mill. Their bodies burned and distorted beyond all possible recognition. The next voice you will hear will be Brigadier General Montgomery Smith, Commander of State Militia at Trenton, New Jersey.
I have been requested by the Governor of New Jersey to place the counties of Mercer and Middlesex as far west as Princeton and east to Jamesburg under martial law. No one will be permitted to enter this area except by special pass issued by state or military authorities. 4 companies of state militia are proceeding from Trenton to Grover's Mill and will aid the evacuation of homes within the range of military operations. Thank you.
You have just been listening to General Montgomery Smith, commanding the state militia at Trenton. In the meantime, further details on the catastrophe at Grover's Mill are coming in. The strange creatures, after unleashing their deadly assault, crawled back into their pit and made no attempt to prevent the efforts of the firemen to recover the bodies and extinguish the fire. Combined fire departments of Mercer County are fighting the flames, which menace the entire countryside. We have been unable to establish any contact with our mobile unit at Grover's Mill, but we hope to be able to return you there at the earliest possible moment. In the meantime, we take you just one moment, please.
Of the creatures in the rocket cylinder at Grover's Mill, I can give you no authoritative information, either as to their nature, their origin, or their purposes on Earth. Of their destructive instrument, I might venture to some conjectural explanation. For want of a better term, I shall refer to the mysterious weapon as a heat ray. It's all too evident that these creatures have scientific knowledge far in advance of our own. It's my guess that in some way they are able to generate an intense heat in a chamber of practically absolute non-conductivity. This intense heat they project in a parallel beam against any object they choose, by means of polished parabolic mirror of unknown composition, much as the mirror of a lighthouse projects a beam of light. That is my conjecture of the origin of the heat ray.
Thank you, Professor Pearson. Ladies and gentlemen, here is a bulletin from Trenton. It is a brief statement informing us that the charred body of Carl Phillips has been identified in a Trenton hospital. Now here's another bulletin from Washington, D.C. Office of the Director of the National Red Cross reports 10 units of the Red Cross emergency workers have been assigned to the headquarters of the state militia stationed outside of Groversville, New Jersey. Here's a bulletin from State Police, Princeton Junction. The fires at Grover's Mill and vicinity are now under control. Scouts report all quiet in the pit and no sign of life appearing from the mouth of the cylinder. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special statement from Harry McDonald, Vice President in charge of operations.
We have received a request from the militia at Trenton to place at their disposal our entire broadcasting facilities. In view of the gravity of the situation and believing that radio has a responsibility to serve in the public interest at all times, we are turning over our facilities to the state militia at Trenton.
This is Captain Lansing of the Signal Corps, attached to the state militia, now engaged in military operations in the vicinity of Grover's Mill. Situation arising from the reported presence of certain individuals of unidentified nature is now under complete control. The cylindrical object, which lies in the pit directly below our position, is surrounded on all sides by 8 battalions of infantry, without heavy field pieces, but adequately armed, with rifles and machine guns. All cause for alarm, if such cause ever existed, is entirely unjustified. The things, whatever they are, do not even venture to poke their heads above the pit. I can see their hiding place plainly in the glare of the searchlights here. With all of their reported resources, these creatures can scarcely stand up against heavy machine gun fire. Anyway, it's an interesting outing for the troops. I can make out their khaki uniforms crossing back and forth in front of the lights. It looks almost like a real war. There appears to be some slight smoke in the woods bordering the Millstone River. Probably a fire started by some campers. Well, we ought to see some action soon. One of the companies is deploying on the left flank, and a quick thrust and it'll all be over. No, wait a minute. I see something on top of the cylinder. No, it's nothing but a shadow. Now the troops are on the edge of the Wilmoth farm. 7,000 armed men closing in on an old metal tube. Wait, that wasn't a shadow. It's something moving. Solid metal. Kind of like a shield like a fair rising out of the cylinder. It's going higher and higher. Why, standing on legs. Actually, bring up on some sort of metal framework. Now it's reaching above the trees and searchlights are on it. Hold on!
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars. The battle in which took place tonight at Grover's Mill has ended in one of the most startling defeats ever suffered by any army in the modern times. 7,000 men armed with rifles and machine guns pitted against a single fighting machine of the invaders from Mars. 120 known survivors. The rest strewn over the battle area from Grover's Mill to Plainsboro, crushed and trampled to death under the metal feet of the monster, or burned to cinders by its heat ray. The monster is now in control of the middle section of New Jersey and has effectively cut the state through its center. Communication lines are down from Pennsylvania to the Atlantic Ocean. Railroad tracks are torn and service from New York to Philadelphia discontinued except routing some of the trains through Allentown and Phoenixville. Highways to north, south, and west are clogged with frantic human traffic. Police and Army reserves are unable to control the mad flight. By morning, the fugitives will have swelled Philadelphia, Camden, and Trenton. It is estimated to twice their normal population. At this time, martial law prevails throughout New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania. We take you now to Washington for a special broadcast on the national emergency, the Secretary of the Interior.
Are we on? Okay. Citizens of the nation, I shall not try to conceal the gravity of the situation that confronts the country, nor the concern of your government in protecting the lives and property of its people. However, I wish to impress upon you, private citizens and public officials, all of you, the urgent need of calm and resourceful action. Fortunately, this formidable enemy is still confined to a comparatively small area. We may place our faith in the military forces to keep them there. In the meantime, placing our faith in God, we must continue the performance of our duties, each and every one of us, so that we may confront this destructive adversary with a nation united, courageous, and devoted to the preservation of human supremacy on this earth. I thank you.
You have just heard the Secretary of the Interior speaking from Washington. Bulletins too numerous to read are piling up in the studio here. We are informed the central portion of New Jersey is blacked out from radio communication due to the effect of the heat ray upon power lines and electrical equipment. Here is a special bulletin from New York. Cables received from English, French, German, scientific bodies offering assistance. Astronomers report continued gas outbursts at regular intervals on planet Mars. Majority voice opinion that the enemy will be reinforced by additional rocket machines. Attempts made to locate Professor Pearson of Princeton, who has observed Martians at close range. It is feared he was lost in recent battle. Langham Field, Virginia. Scouting planes report 3 Martian machines visible above treetops, moving north towards Somerville with a population fleeing ahead of them. Heat ray not in use, although advancing at express train speed. Invaders pick their way carefully. They seem to be making conscious effort to avoid destruction of cities and countryside. However, they stop to uproot power lines, bridges, and railroad tracks. Their apparent objective is to crush resistance, paralyze communication, and disorganize human society. Here is a bulletin from Basking Ridge, New Jersey. Deer hunters have stumbled on a second cylinder similar to the first embedded in the Great Swamp 20 miles south of Morristown. Army field pieces are proceeding from Newark to blow up a second invading unit before cylinder can be opened and the fighting machine rigged. They are taking up position in the foothills of Watchung Mountains. Another bulletin from Langham Field, Virginia. Scouting planes report enemy machines, now 3 in number, increasing speed northward, kicking over houses and trees in their evident haste to form a conjunction with their allies south of Morristown. Machines also sighted by telephone operator east of Middlesex, within 10 miles of Plainfield. Here's a bulletin from Winstonfield, Long Island. Fleet of Army bombers carrying heavy explosive flying north in pursuit of enemy. Scouting planes act as guides. They keep speeding enemy in sight. Just a moment, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we've run special wires to the artillery line in adjacent villages to give you a direct report in the zone of the advancing enemy. First, we take you to the battery of the 22nd Field Artillery, located in the Watchung Mountains.
Range 32 meters.
32 meters.
Projection 39 degrees.
39 degrees.
Fire!
40 yards to the right, sir.
Shift range 31 meters.
31 meters.
Projection 37 degrees.
37 degrees.
Fire!
Ahead, sir. We got the tripod of one of them. They've stopped. The others are trying to repair it.
Quick, get the range. Shift 30 meters.
30 meters.
Projection 27 degrees.
27 degrees.
Fire!
Can't see the shell land, sir. They're letting off a smoke.
What is it?
A black smoke, sir. Moving this way. Lying close to the ground. It's moving fast.
Put on gas masks. Get ready to fire. Shift 24 meters.
24 meters.
Projection 24 degrees.
24 degrees.
Fire!
Still can't see, sir. The smoke's coming nearer.
Get the range.
23 meters.
Projection 22 degrees.
22 degrees.
22 degrees. Army bombing plane B-843 off Bryan, New Jersey. Lieutenant Bott, commanding 8 bombers, reporting to Commander Fairwax, Langham Field. This is Bott reporting to Commander Fairwax, Langham Field. Enemy tripod machines now in sight. Reinforced by 3 machines on Lordstown cylinder. 6 altogether. 1 already crippled. Believed hit by shell from Army gun in Watchung Mountains. Guns now appear silent. A heavy black fog of heat red. Enemy now turns east, crossing the Sag River into Jersey marshes. Another straddle the Bonsall Skyway. Evident objective is New York. They're pushing down at a high-tension power station. The machines are close together now, and we're ready to attack. Planes circling, ready to strike. 1,000 yards, and we'll be over the first. 800 yards, 600 yards, 400, 200, 3. There they go. The giant are lead. Green flash. They're spraying us with flames. 2,000 feet. Engines are giving out. No chance to respond. Only one thing left to do. Drop on them. Playing it off. We're diving on the station. Now the engine's gone. 8.
This is Bay of New Jersey, calling Langham Field. This is Bay of New Jersey, calling Langham Field. Come in, please.
This is Langham Field. Go ahead.
8 Army bombers in engagement with enemy tripod machines over Jersey Flats. Engines destroyed by heat ray. All crashed. 1 enemy machine destroyed. Enemies now discharging heavy black smoke in direction of...
This is Newark, New Jersey. This is Newark, New Jersey. Warning. Poison black smoke pouring in from Jersey marshes. Reaches South Street. Gas masks useless. Urge population to move into open spaces. Automobiles use routes 7, 23, and 24. Avoid congested areas. Smoke now spreading over Raymond Boulevard.
2X2L calling CQ. 2X2L calling CQ. New York. Isn't there anyone on the air? Isn't there anyone on the air? Isn't there anyone? 2X2L.
I'm speaking from the roof of the broadcasting building, New York City. The bells you hear are ringing to warn the people to evacuate the city as Martians approach. Estimated in the last 2 hours, 3 million people have moved out along the roads to the north. Hutchinson River Parkway still kept open for motor traffic. Avoid bridges to Long Island, hopelessly jammed. All communication with Jersey Shore closed 10 minutes ago. No more defenses. Our army wiped out. Artillery, Air Force, everything wiped out. This may be the last broadcast. We'll stay here to the end. People are holding service below us, in the cathedral. Now I look down the harbor. All manner of boats, overload fleeing population, pulling out from docks. Streets are all jammed. Noise and crowds like it's New Year's Eve in city. Wait a minute. Enemy now in sight above the palisade. Five great machines. First one is crossing river. I can see it from here. Wading the Hudson like a man wading through a brook. A bulletin's handed to me. Martian cylinders are falling all over the country. One outside Buffalo, one in Chicago, St. Louis, seem to be timed and spaced. Now the first machine reaches the shore. He stands watching, looking over the city. His steel, cowlish head is even with the skyscrapers. He waits for the others. They rise like a line of new towers on the city's west side. Now they're lifting their metal hands. This is the end now. Smoke comes out. Black smoke, drifting over the city. People in the streets see it now. They're running towards the East River. Thousands of them, dropping like rats. Now the smoke's spreading faster. It's reached Times Square. People are trying to run away from it, but it's no use. They're falling like flies. Now the smoke's crossing 6th Avenue, 5th Avenue, 100 yards away. It's 50 feet. Where'd you come from?
I come from many places. A long time ago, Princeton?
Princeton, huh? That's near Grover's Mill.
Yes.
Grover's Mill. There's no food here. This is my country. All this way end of town down to the river, there's only food for one. Which way are you going?
I don't know. I guess I'm looking for people.
What was that? Did you hear something? Just then?
Only a bird. A live bird!
You get to know that birds have shadows these days. Say, we're in the open here. Let's crawl in this doorway and talk.
Have you seen any Martians? Martians?
Nah, they've gone over to New York. At night, the sky is alive with their lights, just as if people were still living in it. By daylight, you can't see them. 5 days ago, a couple of them carried something big across the flats from the airport. I believe they're learning how to fly.
Fly? Then it's all over with humanity. Stranger, there's still you and I. 2 of us left.
They've got themselves in solid. They've wrecked the greatest country in the world. Those green stars, they're probably falling somewhere every night. They've lost only one machine. There isn't anything left to do. We're done. We're licked.
Where were you? You're in a uniform.
Yeah, what's left of it. I was in the militia. National Guard. That's good. Wasn't any war more than there's war between men and ants?
And we're eatable ants. I found that out. What will they do with us?
I thought it all out. Right now, we're caught as we're wanted. The Martian only has to go a few miles to get crowd to the run. But they won't keep doing that. They'll begin catching us systematic, like keeping the best and storing us in cages, and things they haven't begun on us yet.
Not begun?
Not begun. All that's happened because we don't have sense enough to keep quiet. Bothering them with guns and such stuff, losing our heads and running off in crowds. Now, instead of rushing around blind, we've got to fix ourselves up. Fix ourselves up according to the way things are now. Cities, nations, civilization, progress, done.
But if that's so, what is there to live for?
Well, there won't be any more continents for a million years or so, and no nice little dinner at restaurants. If it's amusement you're after, then I guess the game's up.
And what is there left?
Life, that's what. I want to live. Yeah, and so do you. We're not going to be exterminated, and I don't mean to be caught either, and tamed and fattened and bred like an ox.
What are you going to do?
I'm going on. Right under their feet, I got a plan. We men as men are finished. We don't know enough. We gotta learn plenty before we've got a chance. And we've got to live and keep free while we learn. See, I've thought it all out.
Tell me the rest.
Well, it isn't us that were made for wild beasts. And that's what it's gotta be. That's why I watched you. All these little office workers that used to live in these houses, they'd be no good. They haven't any stuff to them. They just used to run off to work. I've seen hundreds of them running wild to catch the commuter train in morning for fear they'd get canned if they didn't. Running back at night, afraid they won't be able to get to be in time for dinner. Lives insured and little invested in case of accident. And on Sundays, worried about the hereafter. The Martians will be a godsend for those guys. Nice rooming cages, good food, careful breeding, no worries. After a week or so chasing about the fields on empty stomachs, they'll come and be glad to be caught.
You've thought it all out, haven't you?
You bet I have, and that's not all. These Martians will make pets of some of them, train them to do tricks. Who knows, get sentimental over the pet boy who grew up and had to be killed, and some, maybe they'll train to hunt us.
No, that's impossible. No human being.
Yes, they will. There's men who will do it gladly. If one of them ever comes after me, why?
In the meantime, you and I, others like us, where are we going to go when the Martians own the Earth?
I've got it all figured out. We'll live underground. I've been thinking about the sewers. Under New York are miles and miles of them. The main ones are big enough for anybody. Then the cellars, vaults, underground storerooms, railway tunnels, subways. You begin to see, And we'll get a bunch of strong men together. No weak ones. That rubbish out.
And you meant me to go.
Well, I gave you a chance, didn't I?
We won't quarrel about that. Go on.
And we've got to make safe places for us to stay in. See, get all the books we can, science books. That's where men like you and you come in. See? We'll raid the museums. We'll even spy on the Martian. It may be so much we have to learn before. Just imagine this. 4 or 5 of their fighting machines suddenly start off. heat rays and right and left, and not a Martian in them, but men who have learned the way how. It may even be in our lifetime. Gee, imagine having one of them, lovely things with its heat ray wide and free. We turn it on Martians. We turn it on men. We bring everybody down to their knees.
That's your plan.
You and me, and a few more of us, we'd own the world.
I see.
Say, what's the matter? Where are you going?
Not to your world. Goodbye, stranger. Well, after parting with the artilleryman, I came at last to the hall and tunnel. I entered that silent tube, anxious to know the fate of the great city on the other side of the Hudson. Cautiously, I come out of the tunnel and made my way up Canal Street. I reached 14th Street, and there again were black powder and several bodies, and an evil, ominous smell from the gratings of the cellars of some of the houses. I wandered up through the 30s and 40s. I stood alone on Times Square. I caught sight of a lean dog running down 7th Avenue with a piece of dark brown meat in its jaws, a pack of starving mongrels at its heels. He made a wide circle around me, as though he feared I might prove a fresh competitor. I walked up Broadway in the direction of that strange power, past silent shop windows displaying their mute wares to empty sidewalks, past the Capitol Theater, silent, dark, past a shooting gallery where a row of guns faced an arrested line of wooden ducks. Near Columbus Circle, I noticed models of 1939 motor cars in the showrooms, facing empty streets. From over the top of the General Motors building, I watched the flock of birds circling in the sky. I hurried on. Suddenly I caught sight of the hood of a Martian machine, standing somewhere in Central Park, gleaming in a late afternoon sun. An insane idea. I rushed recklessly across Columbus Circle and into the park. I climbed a small hill above the pond at 16th Street, and from there I could see standing in a silent row along the mall 19 of those great metal titans, their cowls empty, their steel arms hanging listlessly by their sides. I looked in vain for the monsters that inhabit those machines. Suddenly, my eyes were attracted to an immense flock of birds that hovered directly below me. They circled into the ground, and there at my eyes, stark and silent, lay the Martians, with hungry birds pecking and tearing brown shreds of flesh from their dead bodies. Later, when their bodies were examined in laboratories, it was found that they were killed by the putrefactive and disease bacteria against which their systems were unprepared, slain after all man's defenses had failed, by the humblest thing that God, in his wisdom, has put upon this earth. Before the cylinder fell, there was general persuasion that all deep space, no life existed beyond the petty surface of our minute sphere. Now we see further. Dim and wonderful is the vision I have conjured up in my mind of life spreading slowly from this little seedbed of a solar system, throughout the inanimate vastness of sidereal space, but that's a remote dream. It may be that the destruction of the Martians is only a reprieve to them and not to us. Is the future ordained, perhaps? Strange it now seems to sit in my peaceful study at Princeton, writing down this last chapter of the record begun at the deserted farm in Grover's Mill. Strange to watch children playing in the streets. Strange to watch young people strolling in the green where new spring grass heals the last black scars of a bruised earth. Strange to watch the sightseers enter the museum, where the disassembled parts of a Martian machine are kept on public view. Strange when I recall the time I first saw it, bright and clean-cut, hard and silent, under the dawn of that last green day. This is Orson Welles, ladies and gentlemen, out of character to assure you that the War of the Worlds has no further significance than as the holiday offering it was intended to be. The Mercury Theater's own radio version of dressing up in a sheet and jumping out of a bush and saying boo. Starting now, we couldn't soak all of your windows and steal all your garden gates by tomorrow night. So we did the next best thing. We annihilated the world before your very ears and utterly destroyed the CBS. You'll be relieved, I hope, to learn that we didn't mean it, and that both institutions are still open for business. So goodbye, everybody, and remember the terrible lesson you learned tonight. The grinning, glowing, globular invader of your living room is an inhabitant of the pumpkin patch. And if your doorbell rings and there's nobody there, that was no Martian. It's Halloween.
Filled with smiling faces down in old Havana town. Every senorita seems a little sweeter down in old Havana town. Why remain a dreamer, hop aboard a steamer, pack your things and hurry down. You can always see me where the light is dreaming.